And we're going to also be talking about some things that are going on, some meetings surrounding school policing. So I just want to thank you for coming in to the show today, Mr. Clyde
And thank you
Bowray.
for having me. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome, very welcome. So yes, thank you for everyone who's going to share it. I'm actually going to be coming off. Make sure that everybody's sharing this and going to our radio on fire.com page. We're also able to call in at 404-436-1277. So I'm going to be going right into the questions. So could you just talk about briefly one of the things, I guess, the barriers? I've heard some barrier behind school police not being necessary in there. Maybe replacing it with counselors and not really having police in the school system. Could you talk about and give, I guess, we'll say, the pros of having it and the benefits that you've seen, having school police in the school systems?
So in 1967, the
1967.
uh, powers to be in Baltimore felt necessary to have a school security department. And from there, the officers that were hired were primarily responsible for night response. So they would go to different schools at night and when the alarms came in. If you fast forward to around 1980s or so, the need extended to putting these same officers from removing them from a primarily night response position to putting them actually physically in schools in order to provide security for schools. As time went on, Baltimore was in the 80s, early 90s, late 80s. Baltimore was littered with a number of different quote unquote special police. So if you look at the Baltimore Arena, which was the Civic Center at the time, the Convention Center, Lexington Market, Giant Food, the Housing Authority, different places, different entities like that. In some cases, most of them were considered special police. In 1991, Governor Schaefer signed Senate Bill 550, which granted Baltimore City the authority to create and form its own police force. So we've always had that title, school police, and that goes back to the 60s. However, it was more or less a special police role. So that's the history of school police. So 1991 was the beginning of the police department that you see now, which encompasses the 911 call dispatch, uniforms, police cars, and all of those different things that you see from Baltimore School Police now. The pros, our officers, we all have a unique role when it comes to being in schools. When I say a unique role, we're not only counselors, we're not only parents of our own students go to public schools, but we're counselors. We do the job of being that positive role model that students can see on a daily basis. We're their friend in a uniform. Our our history tells, it shows itself. Thousands and thousands of kids have come through the Baltimore City schools and have interacted with our officers on and off duty in a positive light. I mean, the best example I can give you is if you look at the GEMS program that's run by Corporal Betty Covington, that is a pro. That is a program that she started down at when it was Southern High School, and then it converted to Digital Harbor, to where she mentored young girls and talked about some of the young ladies were at risk, and that program has gone from a small group of girls to it's now a citywide program, and it's a mentoring program. When you get into athletics, you have Corporal Merrick, you have Officer Bailey Hill, you have the winningest high school football coach in the history of Baltimore City is a Baltimore City school police, and that's Officer Lawrence Smith. Detective Lawrence Smith. If you look at some of the things that we do in outreach in the community, once a month we try to do some sort of community outreach. I mean, in the hot summer months, I dress up and put the suit on, and I go out as McGruff. And, you know, so if you ever see McGruff walking around, that's usually me walking around with
look
the.
at that. That's on the next role.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we try to, you know, show the positive things that officers can bring to our community, and we try to set that example, and that's, you know, one of our main goals is public service.
Well, I'm just going to say that I think it's important to have school police in the schools, and I guess I will just speak off of the experience of I've had it when I was in middle school and high school, and just being the PTA president at Mervo, we've seen how the school police have stepped up, and not only have they stepped up to do certain things as far as helping to make the school safe, so that that's almost, I don't want to say that's the largest school in the city, and it's totally under control inside. A lot of things that were happening as far as robberies were always mainly outside of.
Correct.
You know? And so, and even with that, like arrests, that came from school police before Northeast District even, you know? And so just to have someone on site that can do that, and not only just making it safe, but I also saw that they have built relationships with the students.
Correct.
As soon as they see it, it's like, what's up, you know, officer so-and-so, or just the respect is there because they see this officer, not an officer that's sitting here and just trying to dictate and you know, and to bully or to militarize anything, but to build relationships.
Absolutely.
And there's times where officers have called me as just being a PTA president to tell me that a student was homeless. I mean, so they're kind of the first responders.
Yes.
Sometimes. So
Yes.
I understand, I guess, the stigma behind, because what we see with police officers, but we have to look at, you know, the pros and cons, and so you definitely have, you know, my support on that.
Thank you.
But we do want to make sure we educate a lot of our viewers to know that it's more than just going in there and showing off, you know. And you're not even showing off. Half of them, I don't even know they're even armed or not armed, but just their presence will let them know they can't do X, Y, Z around them.
And, you know, one of the biggest topics that we've had to discuss over the last few years was whether or not school police officers are armed or should be armed, and things like that. So let me give you a little history on that.
Yes.
So around, I would say, late 90s to early 2000s, school police officers had, you know, weapons, and, you know, the law was not changed to allow school police officers to carry weapons. So, like I said, early 2000, around 2001, 9/11 happened. The chief of police at the time realized that Baltimore schools were considered soft targets. We had, you know, nationwide there was, after 9/11, there was like anthrax scares and things like that. So the school police officers were, because it was a soft target, were armed all day. Because, you know, the powers that be did not want a terrorist attack to happen and our officers to be ill-equipped to handle it. If you fast forward to 2002, the DC Beltway sniper came as close as 25th and Howard. In Baltimore City, and he was going around randomly shooting people, and the intelligence that he was going to shoot a kid. And you know what? He did shoot a kid. He shot him in Prince George's County, down, I believe, in Oxon Hill at an elementary school. So our officers were then armed full time, without fault. You know, so we fast forward, years and years and years go by. We go all the way back to the DC sniper. Our officers had their weapons on them every day. You know, when I came into Baltimore City School Police in 2003, you know, I went to the gun range, and I went to my assignment after I went to the gun range, and I was armed at all times. So there was no issues. There's never been any history of an officer being disarmed. There's no history of an officer using a weapon in a malicious way. But once we realized that we were not in compliance with the law, as things changed, you know, we unionized in 2010. You know, we had a chief of police change in 2007. And so once we realized that we had some things and some language we needed to clean up, we took the necessary steps to do things the right way, and that was to go through the legislature and speak at the Senate and the House to try to get a bill passed to correct the old language that prohibited our officers from carrying guns. Again, this goes back to prior to 1991 when we were a police department. When if I without rehashing the whole thing, special police were more or less security guards with arrest powers at the location where they work. So that's where our officers were. We were special police, but in 1991 we became a full service police department.
Okay.
So in that sense, the law should have changed to allow our officers to carry guns, because an unarmed police officer gives you a unreasonable expectation of safety.
Okay, so you kind of answered one of the questions that we had about the authority of school police. Are they allowed to bear arms? So since 9/11, school police are allowed to carry
Correct.
guns. My next question was about how prepared are the school police for events like Sandy Hook?
So we have concurrent jurisdiction with Baltimore Police. That means that anywhere in Baltimore city limits, we can enforce the laws, whether it's traffic laws or make arrests. As far as training, we have joint training with Baltimore City SWAT and Baltimore City Patrol officers in the event that we have an active armed assailant. Our officers have that specialized training. There's ALERT, there's ALICE, there's these other acronyms of different national training, and we go through all of the gamut of all of that. We have a school that's closed down and no longer used that we go through and use. So it's no longer being used for students, but we use that to train in. So we have a cafeteria, we have a gymnasium, we have classrooms that are set up to allow us to have that realistic feel of a live training scenario. So those trainings to respond to a Sandy Hook style situations, our officers are prepared to do so. However, the law currently prohibits our officers from having guns during the instructional school day. So in the morning during intake, we have our guns. Once all of the students are in the school, the officer then goes and secures a weapon at a remote location. I'm not going to say it's a cafeteria or something like that, but it's a remote location where the officers store the weapons. If the officer leaves for the day or leaves the building, or he's going to another school for another call, he can go retrieve the gun. And then at dismissal, the officers can have the weapons. And if you come to an athletic event, such as a football game or basketball game, our officers have their guns all times. So it's about a 6-hour window that the officers have to secure that weapon. And as you can see with these incidents that are happening nationally, anything can happen in that 6-hour window.
So I like the fact that we kind of got clarification. That was kind of one of the questions about being in, I guess, instructional time to be inside the schools with the gun on them. But you're saying that they do not. They
No.
have to secure their weapons during instruction time. All right. So that kind of helps, and it also makes aware that they can get to it in the event that something happened, an emergency.
Well, that's been the problem
Somewhat.
that I've had with this legislation. We are not allowed to arbitrarily just break the law. The law says that the officer is prohibited from having a gun. So the one thing that I've been beaten is the reason we need to change the law, because if an officer goes and retrieves the weapon and something goes bad with that scenario, then he's, in a sense, he or she has taken the law into their own hands.
Okay.
And I'm quite sure with the tone of things that are going on nationally, there might be some calls for that officer to be criminally charged. And so, we don't want to put our officers in that situation to tell them to break the law. But, as parents and as people who invest in this city, who live in this city, we don't want to sit around and watch or listen to innocent kids getting slaughtered. I mean, just the thought of that, it breaks my heart, to know that we have the training and the will to actually be, step in between the threat and our students. But because of bureaucracy and politics, we're not able to have those tools available at all times.
As you were speaking, it kind of puts the officers in jeopardy.
Nah.
If a situation was to occur, you know, yeah, an officer has to make a split-second decision whether you want to go gather your weapon during an instructional period of time. And if it goes well, you get accolades. But if it goes bad, you yourself are in the line of fire.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I think about some of the schools that we have, and if an officer is in the gymnasium and he's doing regular patrol, and an incident occurs in the cafeteria, and let's say his office or the main office or wherever the weapon is stored is on the other side of the cafeteria, he cannot reasonably be expected to run through the live event, risk his life to go to the safe to get the weapon, when if he was treated like every other police officer in every other jurisdiction in the state of Maryland, the officer would have the weapon readily available to end the threat, to move forward and end the threat. And I think it's really, really important to know that Maryland has 24 jurisdictions. 23 out of the 24 jurisdictions have armed police officers during the instructional day. We in Baltimore are the only ones that are different. And if you look at that 15-year gap, if we had scenarios to show that our officers acted recklessly, or kids were shot, or officers were disarmed in that 15-year gap, our history shows that we can carry the guns without incident, and be responsible with those weapons.
Right.
The history shows that.
So, as far as training in response to a threat, does the school police have just as much training as a regular city
Yes.
or county police?
Yes, it's the exact same training. Our officers are required to go through an entry-level police academy, which is the Baltimore Police Academy in most cases. And we are required to go through in-service training, at least 40 hours of in-service training every year. And let me tell you what's funny. 3 years ago, with dealing with the issues with when I say a small group of people made a lot of noise about this. And their issue was about arrest. Their issue was about arrest data, that we were arresting too many kids. Instead of addressing their issue, they attached themselves to this gun issue and started the whole militarization of police, and putting pictures of armed SWAT teams walking through hallways. And that's not the school police that we see.
No.
And that's not the school police that we know. We don't even have a SWAT team. We don't even have assault rifles. So to put those pictures on Facebook and social media and pass emails and things like that it will give a person the mindset that, hey, man, these guys are going to have ballistic helmets on and riot shields, and that's not what we're trying to accomplish. To have that empty holster, is no good for anyone. Not for the police officer and not for the student. So to answer your question, we do have the exact same training as every other law enforcement officer, such as the Baltimore City Sheriff, Baltimore City Police, Baltimore County, and all. For the listening audience, so that they understand, we're governed by it's called MPTSC, which is the Maryland Police Training and Correctional Standards Commission.
Okay.
I might have messed up the acronym, but it's
I don't know, but I always replay.
right. But MPTSC is the governing body for all law enforcement officers in the state of Maryland. Be it a Maryland State Trooper or a Transportation Authority police officer, an MTA police officer. We all have this one card in our wallet that states that we met the minimum standards to become a police officer. And our Baltimore City School police officers have those cards.
Okay. Now, there was one viewer said from yesterday, well, actually today, they were suggesting metal detectors,
Okay.
which would, of course, take an entire lengthy time to even go past that. You would take 2 hours if you're going to have like a large school, right? But then that's also going into another, I don't know, I guess another issue for me, to have metal detectors. But the fact that we don't have metal detectors, that means that there are some students probably more than likely coming in there armed, and yet you have police officers who can't. So like you just said, it's kind of defeating the purpose if anything ever did go down.
So some schools do have metal detectors. Some of our schools do. I don't have a specific list, but those metal detectors are are staffed by the school. What I will say about metal detectors, I think that they're great. I think that security cameras are great. However, if a person is goal oriented and they don't really care about the consequences, they've decided that they're going to die that day. They've decided that they're going to shoot it out with the police or they're going to kill themselves. But they want to make the news and have a mass casualty incident. If you look at what happened down in Parkland, Florida, if you look at what happened in Sandy Hook, these people didn't care about a metal detector. What happens is if you have a metal detector and you have one of these goal-oriented persons, once they walk through the metal detector, it will beep. It will say, beep, there's a gun, there's a weapon. But who is going to stop them now that they've walked through? Because now they have access. And you know what the security
Makes a
camera
lot
will
of
do?
sense.
The security camera will give you great footage of the fact that the metal detector worked, but the police officer is not there to stop them.
Yeah.
So my question is, talking about the metal detectors, do you think metal detectors are a deterrent or they're not a deterrent?
Well, I think it's a deterrent, but if you look at some of our schools that are old in Baltimore, we have this $1 billion 21st Century Schools project that's underway with building new schools. But if you look at our schools, it's very, very, very easy to get into a building and go to one of the side doors, take a rock or a pebble and put it inside of the side door, walk out and go to whatever book bag or whatever you stashed anywhere and come right back into the building. And you've successfully gone through the metal detector, but you've also beat the system because there's so many access points all around these neighborhood schools.
Okay, so I actually wanted to read this actual statement from one of the viewers because I think it brings value to the show.
Okay.
It says, things that we value and deem valuable normally require and deserve our protection. Banks have guards, our city politicians have police protection, jewelry store owners have armed guards. So why are our children who are not just as valuable but yet irreplaceable have armed protection? Our school police are dedicated professionals.
I mean, the person that sent that statement, and I could not agree with them more. I talked about 9/11. Well, let's talk about 9/11 again. It took for Americans to see planes flying into buildings and people jumping out of buildings for us to get serious about safety of our airports. And what did we get out of that? We're now inconvenienced maybe 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes 2 hours from going through TSA. But you know what? We feel safer knowing that we go through TSA and that somebody's not going to have a box cutter. They're going to go through these screenings, and we're comfortable that we have at least a fighting chance if someone tries to rush the cockpit. Because you know what happens? Now, these pilots are no longer allowed to fly with the doors open.
Yeah.
There's multiple safety checks. Let's do that for our students. Our lawmakers. If you go down, and this is the reasoning that some of the lawmakers throughout Annapolis used to pass Senate Bill 1265. They said, as we sit here as lawmakers,
You said Senate Bill
1265,
1265.
which is the
I'm gonna be looking
Safety
that up
to
too.
School Act,
Okay.
passed by Governor Hogan in this
Okay.
past legislative session.
Okay.
If our legislators have a armed Maryland State Trooper in every hearing that they have, so if someone from the public who already has gone through a metal detector still has to face in every room down where our elected officials are conducting their business, still have to face a armed Maryland State Trooper. There's police officers at the door, and there's troopers in the hearing rooms. So having armed police officers does not stop people from doing their business. And the one thing I always tell the parents or people that have concerns about that, if we go to our local malls, Towson Town Center, Mondawmin Mall, all of these different malls, the Gallery, Harbor Place, they all have armed police officers there. Do our kids say, oh, I can't shop, I can't go to downtown locker room today, or what are your sponsors? I was trying to say if we had a local sponsor. I can't go to one of these different stores, and I just can't focus on shopping because that police officer's walking around with a gun. Kids don't say that.
No.
People conduct their business. They go through our local stores, our local malls.
I was gonna say Towson Town Center. I go there and it's like police is everywhere. Makes me feel uncomfortable because you can see, like, I don't want to say they're waiting for trouble, but they're everywhere. Everywhere you turn, every floor, every level. And so this was one of the viewers stated that her daughter was cornered by a boy with a huge knife and had her life threatened. She stated that the school did nothing, and she said she had to notify the police herself, only to end up knowing that the principal ended up handing over a drawer full of knives that she has confiscated. So basically, it's nothing really that they're able to do or to have safety. Not to say that an armed police, but a presence of a police officer can make a bigger difference if they see that they're in there. But I think if they see the lack of,
Correct.
It's gonna kind of go wow. And I'm not talking about elementary school, because we have the debate that, you know, elementary school should not be seeing this, even though some are coming in there with things.
Talk about it.
Okay? But I believe that there should be some kind of security, but having someone come in there just with a baton, you know, I don't think that's going to help somebody with a gun.
Correct.
And you have to understand where we live and what we're dealing with at this moment. So I guess with mine is there's a lot of, like, with the code of conduct, things that a person can and cannot do, even when they know that a person, they confiscate a knife. Why isn't that child out of the school?
Well,
So there's still guidelines where they can't do nothing.
So you know, we go back to the original conversation. The push was that we were arresting too many kids.
Yeah.
And that was the ultimate goal, was to get to the arrest data. They got to the arrest data. They used the gun issue to open the door. They started having conversations with the school system. The school system held conversations for 2 years without even including the police union in these discussions about school safety with these advocacy groups. So the code of conduct is as a direct result of those meetings.
Yes.
And it continues to change.
Yes.
There's no intervention. You know what? Our arrest numbers are down.
Okay.
They're down to historic levels. I mean, I don't think we have 50 when we've averaged 250 to 500 arrests at this time years ago. So arrest numbers are significantly down. However, incidents are not down. The actual crime stats has not fluctuated or changed. People are still getting assaulted. I don't think, the public should know that our schools are not bad, but our schools are not 100% safe as some people might believe. We don't have bad situations, but however, there are always situations that come about that are downplayed.
Yes.
You know, to say, oh, well, yeah, there was a gun recovered, but there was no student interaction. It was quickly taken up. Yeah, that all sounds good as a press release.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of fluff.
Yes,
You know?
I was about to say you hit it. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fluff.
That's what's trying to happen.
So, my next question is a little bit edgier question. Is there some type of racial biasness or stigma? Because where the shootings occur, the mass shootings occur, there is no school police, there's no metal detectors. But you go into the urban neighborhoods and the urban environments where massively there has not been any undertakings of great mass shootings and violence, and that's where the precautions and deterrence appear, but there's no shooting in those environments. So my question is, how is it decided upon which schools will have the school police, the metal detectors, while others have some and some do not?
So that's based on statistics, and that's, those decisions are made by our leadership. And I must say this, our command staff, and I have to give them a shout out. And it's very rare that you see labor and management always on the same page, because we're the union and they're managers. But Chief Ham has done an excellent job leading this department. His deputy, Captain Norman Coleman.
I made sure I tagged him too.
Oh, yes.
Chief Ham, yes.
His deputy, Captain Coleman, has done an excellent job. Other two commanders, Lieutenant Shook and Lieutenant Small, have done an excellent job leading our men and women. So to answer your question, those decisions are made by that team right there, that command staff. And they decide who get metal detectors and all. who gets police services and all that. That's their role. But the one thing that I must say is we had about between 25 and 30 lockdown situations since the beginning of the school year. Lockdown situations occur. Let's just use the analogy. Let's take the school board headquarters. That's 200 East North Avenue. If a shooting is to occur on the corner of North Avenue and Calvert, that school building essentially goes down on lockdown status until police activity is cleared from the area. What happens when we have these lockdown situations? We have neighborhood schools. Our schools are in these communities where some of these 347 homicides that occurred last year, or the 21 homicides that occurred this month. Our schools are in these communities. We're not talking about a farm or off the road and things like that. These are community schools. And situations happen in broad daylight. There was a situation today, a 48-year-old man was shot on Greenmount Avenue, and one of our schools had to go into a reverse alert status because we can't say lockdown anymore because it scares people.
Negative connotation.
Yeah. So now it's reverse alert. So we have to switch that. I've been going around saying how many lockdown drills we had, so they changed the term. So it's reverse alert status is the new term now. But we had a school today that had to go into that status where kids have to, and our kids shouldn't have to practice for that. However, my father and my mother talked about they had to prepare for like bombs and stuff like that back in the Cold War, back in the 60s and 70s. So our students are now training like our grandparents, like their grandparents, like our parents did, hiding under desks and hiding against walls and things like that. And that's the unfortunate reality of our society. But I guess I hope I answer your question.
Yeah.
Just sum it up. We have these scenarios that go on throughout the city, and it's not a negative thing on the schools. It's just the communities that our schools are in.
So speaking of communities, and of course we're trying to bridge that gap. We have a gap. I'm just reading, so I'm not being rude, but I'm reading through, and so I've seen quite a good deal of people who are saying they can't trust the police, and they just put that over just overall, in uniform, we don't trust you. Correct. Because of all this going on. So what are you all doing to kind of help alleviate or show the trust in our communities? I do know there's some things with our youth and our, I don't know if it's called Explore. Like there are some things you're doing with the youth.
Officer friendly.
Yeah, McGruff and so forth. But I guess if you can give examples of things that you all are doing now just to kind of show the community that it's not what you're seeing. Like social media can take one incident and just blow it. And not to say that, just because you had that one incident, I don't think it should be that all officers are bad. But that's what we're dealing with. I'm just reading through, and a few of them just said, I don't trust. It was kind of like, we don't even want to hear about anything else. I don't trust.
So I look at it, in this city, we had a tragedy that happened a few years ago in this city. And it's maybe not the one you might be thinking about. I'm going to talk about.
City, Maryland, city, county, two tragedies.
City.
Got it.
So in Baltimore City, we had a doctor who worked for a large institution in this city, who was entrusted with his patients, and he was recording and things like that. He had videotape of them, and he violated their trust. He wound up killing himself, but he was violating the trust of his patients. And people did not stop going to that institution for medical treatment. They didn't stop. People still went there every day. Because the sins of one should not be cast on everyone else.
Absolutely.
That shouldn't be our burden to bear what happened in other jurisdictions. And I'm the first person to say it. If you look at the history of when we talked about one of the first incidents that happened that regarding mistrust of police, the police caught the bad rap for the Trayvon Martin situation. police court. Why should we have to suffer for that?
I can tell you why. Well, why people may think that, because with the incident that you're referring to with Dr. Levy, that was not a policy thing. That was something he did specifically. So they didn't hold the hospital accountable for that, because that was something he did. He messed up. Had he lived, he would have been fired or whatever.
And prosecuted.
Yes. You see where I'm going?
Yes.
But with some of the incidents that happened with the police, some of those things are policy based, or there is this. Every officer that I've ever talked to always denies this, but the average citizen feels that there's some type of arrest quota.
Okay.
But all officers that I've ever talked to always say, nope, that's not true. And it may not be true, but that's what the public perceives. And so it's just so many systematic things that I think if an officer in another jurisdiction does it, it's still something that generally goes back to your handbook.
Yes, and I agree. I agree. And to answer that question, the policies are made by managers. And in some cases, managers and line officers, or the rank and file. The rank and file are charged with responsibilities of keeping crime down. I'll take my sister agency, Baltimore Police. When the officer gets in a patrol car to start his shift, they have 14 to 16 calls in the hole just to start their shift because they're working short. So they don't get an opportunity to get out and be officer friendly. They don't get an opportunity to walk the communities. When I grew up in Sandtown, Winchester, I knew all of the officers in the Western District because they stopped, they told us to get out the street, they told us to get off of the roof of the schools.
But crime was still crime. You don't seem like you that much different in age from me. And I can remember that time as well. But crime was still up.
It was still up.
Yeah.
It was still up. But they had the numbers to address it, and they didn't have the bureaucracy and the politics involved of stopping it.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's one of the things
true.
that's going on. To allow, when I turn on the radio in the morning, and that's about us dealing with our culture. When I turn on the radio in the morning, and I love my culture. I love hip hop. But when I hear Molly Percocet and things like that, this is what our kids are listening to. If you listen to the song that DJ Khaled and Future and Beyonce and Jay-Z, Future in the hook saying, "I'm not going to stop for the law." So it's promoting that. We're promoting that to our youth.
But it's twofold. It's two, and it's both sides of it. So from the citizen's perspective, they're really focusing that on corrupt police officers or racist police officers that do exist. And then on in the defense of the officers, they have an element of people that's not positive as well. But it's like both sides. So I can understand both points.
So for racist police officers or corrupt police officers, we want to identify them quickly and get them out of our profession. We want them gone.
The citizens can't. But see, there's nothing on their head that says that's a racist one. This is a good one. That's one that's corrupt. This is a good one. So they just lump everybody. The only thing they can say is the uniform or the badge, and it's wrong. But it's just that's all that they can do.
So I had someone ask me, why don't y'all turn in bad cops? I said, did you ever think about that relative or cousin or friend that you grew up with that just don't break the law around you? These guys don't do that or conduct themselves that way around good cops because they know.
But you know that they're bad though. Like the family member you talking about, we know that they doing wrong. They may not did it in front of us, but we know.
Most.
But okay, but when those flags come up, it's up to managers to get rid of them. It's up to managers to hold them accountable. It's up to managers to put them on trial. Or look, I know police officers that I know that are great cops that got terminated because they wore the wrong jacket when they were out on medical leave. So it's very easy to get rid of a police officer. It's very easy to fire a cop if you want to.
So it's about alliances then?
I don't think it's about alliances. I think it's more about the bosses have an expectation that is put on them by their political leaders to drive down crime. And so they put those pressures to say, hey, you guys got to go clear this corner, or you guys got to do this, you guys got to do that. And that pressure is real. Is real.
It's real. I have a question for you. Definitely, like this. I'm sorry. This is my last one.
This hit the top.
I'm sorry.
For
This is my
him.
last one. It appears to me, me being a journalist, that I have never seen a situation, or very rarely, I can't recall a situation where an officer was accused of something and the FOP was like, yeah, he did that.
Okay.
I just always feel like they say, oh, no, what? Our officer? No. And they just automatically, I've never seen them say, yeah, he was wrong, all bad. It's never happened that I can recall. Maybe I'm missing.
So, and I'm going to, the most famous corruption trial in the history of Baltimore now with these GTTF guys. I've heard my counterpart in Baltimore City, the union president of Baltimore City Police, say this publicly. They didn't spend one dime from the FOP to defend the GTTF. Not one dime. The FOP didn't pay for their money. Pay for their attorney. Didn't spend any money on defending them.
But when the case initially was brought up, they were standing somewhere different than they're standing now.
Well, because everyone, just like every citizen, that officer deserves their day in court. And
True.
When the facts come out, the facts come out. Once, the attorney, all right, so let me break down this whole FOP thing so people can get an understanding. That is the boogeyman. People use the FOP as a boogeyman. The FOP is the labor union for police officers. It's the union. You pay dues to be a part of this organization. And when you pay dues to be a part of that organization, there's a realistic expectation that you're going to have a defense if you are accused of something, whether you're guilty or not. And so
That's fair.
It's no different than a criminal defense attorney walking into a courtroom. If they know their client is innocent and or guilty, it's no different than a criminal defense attorney standing up and defending that client, because they have to do that. We have to do that. When there are situations where, we can't talk about internal conversations, a particular situation, but I'll tell you conversations I've had with officers that say, hey, look, you're going to have to resign. You're going to have to fall on the sword, and you're going to have to resign. You're going to have to walk into this courtroom, and you're going to plead guilty. That's just a recommendation. You can do what you want. You can roll the dice. But if you walk out of here with your freedom and without this job, then you've won. But if you have to go before that judge or that jury and you're found guilty, you're not walking out of here. You're going to walk in the back with handcuffs on. And so some people have made that choice, and
Sometimes they roll the dice.
they roll the dice, and some people have gone to jail, and some people have walked away with their freedom, but without their job. So, that's the role of the FOP. It's no different than any other union that's out there. We just have to represent our membership. And our main goals are pay, benefits, and working conditions. That's our main goal.
And speaking on the conversation before, when a lot of people do have complaints, they just complain. Like, they don't go through policies and procedures. Very rarely do you see someone go through and file, get attorneys or whatever, and file criminal proceedings against whatever they felt like they were mistreated, or there was some racial biasness done to them, or the police was very belligerent and had police brutality. They rarely ever go to the Citizens Review Board. So I feel like as people, if there is a concern, you have to advocate for your own rights and not just say, oh, this happened to me. You're responsible for yourself. Whatever happened to you, don't just cry and say this happened to me. Advocate for yourself and follow the proper protocol. We can't say how it's going to turn out or how it didn't turn out, but you make that step for yourself to advocate for yourself.
Let me tell you a funny, this is the reality. You know how some people use the FOP as the boogeyman? Well, our real life boogeyman in law enforcement, when we have those uniforms on, is internal affairs. They're the real boogeyman for us.
Yes.
Like, nobody wants to go and get an IID number and go through that process of being suspended.
Yes.
You can't work any overtime. Sitting on the desk, you're stigmatized.
Evaluated.
So that is a real. I can tell you now, officers do not want to go through that process of having an internal affairs number. They just don't. They don't. And most officers, and I would say for the most part, the overwhelming majority of police officers conduct themselves in a professional manner on a regular basis. It's that small percentage of police officers that make us all look bad.
Now, I know before they used to have a, I could be saying this wrong, but a community engagement unit, and they took
Okay.
that away because it was a shortage of officers.
Fiscal dollars.
I don't know, but they used to have it because Northeast used to have it specifically for community engagement. And like I said, I don't see that as often anymore, where they can go out into the community and actually just solely engage and try to bridge that gap. So that was one of the things I was going to say. Do you know anything about it coming back on? And then the second part was evaluation, as she was stating. Yes, they have the training, which you stated, but are there any kind of wellness? Because I think that, PTSD and even the officers are probably scared, or mental health is important even for officers, because if they're dealing with something, you don't want someone to just be quick to go to the gun. They should be fully trained. And I guess in the training, I wanted to know, is any kind of wellness, health and wellness is in there.
Evaluations, things like that.
But I think all of them should go through some kind of wellness. And I think Chief, I forgot her name. She's no longer with him, but she was pushing for that to be in, a part of a mandatory.
So wellness, there was a bill, I forget the number offhand, but there was a bill in the legislature to try to force officers to go and go to seek medical treatment or debriefing and things like that.
Yes.
That is mandatory now if you're involved in a critical incident.
Okay.
But it's an evaluation. It's it gets into HIPAA.
Okay.
When you start forcing people to go to treatment, and if they disclose something, and like you said, the stigma, if they disclose something and all of a sudden, they're put on modified duty, and eventually, most people will not share if they feel as though that there's a chance that they could lose their job, that ultimately lose their house, their health benefits for their kids. So some people won't share, and some people take to these other vices. I mean, I just was a part of, with the Maryland State FOP, we had a training at Ocean City on Friday specifically about PTSD. We had over 100 officers in this training from throughout the state. That's going. Though it's great to give that training to police officers, but the group that needs to see that is the managers, so they get to understand and see,
And evaluate.
and they can say, yeah, look, your officer might come to you with this issue, but how do you address him? How do you treat him? And I realized that sometimes we see things that we just can't get over. I mean, I recall having a situation, and I'm thankful that I'm spiritually grounded, and I have my pastor's number that I can pick up the phone and call her. But to see to perform CPR on a 2-year-old baby and follow that baby to Johns Hopkins, where that baby ultimately died after being struck by a car, and have her blood all on you, and stand in a waiting room, and to pick up the phone and call your pastor, and your pastor pray with you. I don't know if everyone has that spiritual outlet, but to know or have that conversation that I know I did everything I could do.
Absolutely.
Now I know the police officers, they have the chaplains that kind of be linked up with them. I guess even going into the community, but even to be a spiritual.
But you
outlet for
kind of
themselves.
teeter on separation of church and state, because some people don't. Like when I worked at another agency, we would pray in the morning before we started the police academy, and one of our classmates was offended, so we had to move the prayer out of the room to another location. This was at another police department, but some people are offended. Some people don't have a higher power or spiritual, or they're not spiritually grounded, and that's not something that's negative, but that's just what they believe. So we just wonder, like, you don't want to force a chaplain on someone, but you just try to give them those options or those outlets, that if you're having these type of, like if you're having visitors, or you having can't sleep, or things like that, you need outlets to go. And you know what was funny? A lot of states are starting to get onto PTSD. But if they get into PTSD, then they look at it as the fact that they don't want to pay that because it becomes an occupational disorder. And sometimes people might have to medically retire because of
Sure
that.
indeed.
And now they have to pay the cost of that insurance, paying that person, because ultimately
Disability.
that disability costs, right? So a lot of states don't want to identify that. They don't want, but it's real in our profession, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed locally here in Maryland. And we just really have to, make sure that our officers get those same wraparound services statewide.
Absolutely. Now, I guess we'll be wrapping it up soon, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell viewers why you think it is important to have school polices in the school system. And I do want to say that I want, a good. I'll say it as well, but there's a school board meeting coming up May the 8th at 5 p.m. And like I stated, I will be going to testify in support. But I just wanted to either, use this platform to encourage people. We do have to kind of get away from, I know it's very hard, but kind of get away from that stigma that all polices are bad. Just like if you looked at a young man, you're going to call him a thug, or you're going to say he doesn't have until you hear him speak. So sometimes it's a matter of us just, classifying them as such without even knowing them. And so, again, the meeting is Tuesday, I believe, May 8th at 5 p.m. It's going to be a public board meeting, 200 East North Avenue, and it's going to be talking about school police policy along with other things. But I wanted to give Sergeant Clyde Boatwright the opportunity to just, speak on the importance of having it.
So the importance of having school police officers is our officers are there to engage students, to be that positive voice, to be that person that speaks to our students in the morning, and so that students can, the last thing a student needs to worry about when they're in an environment of learning is being safe.
Yes.
They should feel safe. I mean, there's a reasonable expectation of safety. In fact, at the college level and the post-secondary education level, there's something called the Clery Act, because people have to publish their crime stats so people know when they're sending their kids off to college what's going on in these universities that their kids attend. So in Baltimore, it is important to have our officers continue to be in schools. It's important to have our officers continue to be that bridge and stand in the gap. You talked about the scenario that happened over at Mervo and City College. It was our officers, along with the Northeast District, under the leadership of Major Shorter,
Absolutely.
that stopped those robberies.
Absolutely.
That hunted these guys down.
That's why I'm
chased them down.
testifying, because I know that they were the ones.
Yes, it's our officers that get to the bottom of it. Kids come up to our officers and give us information. They give us all kinds of information about what's going on. And it's not that they're snitching. They want to be safe.
Yes.
And so we need to keep that
Relations.
momentum going. And let's be real. The big push about mental health equals nonprofit grant money. I agree that mental health is needed. I think all of our officers realize that psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, all of that's needed.
All is needed.
But not at the expense of the police officer, because we're needed as well.
Yeah.
And if you look at other jurisdictions, 23 out of 24 have police officers in schools with all of their tools. 23 out of 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and these other counties have a school safety department, but they also have armed police officers in these buildings. So I think it's important that we continue this. We're unique in Maryland, but not unique in the country. There's school police departments all throughout the nation. In cities like Los Angeles, Miami-Dade, Cleveland, there's school police departments all over the nation. And here in Baltimore, we are the gold standard. We have the training, and we have the will to do the job.
All right. Now, I do want to just state, just from the Mervo's incident, social media, it just went viral of the negativity, of the miscommunication. And so what we did as far as the PTA is where we offered a public safety forum and meeting, and we had everyone there. And it was just amazing to me to see so many people share something negative, but when a solution was there and when we came with facts and status, it wasn't as many people that shared it. And what I'm stating is that we can't be so quick to just, stereotype one thing and not even be there at the table when there's a solution. So I commend you all, because I know for a fact, and I can only speak off of Mervo, I know for a fact that it was the school police and Northeast District Police. So yeah, shout out to Major Shorter and entire Northeast District, because they go over and beyond. And a lot of those, we had incidents of robberies. A lot of those incidents none of them happened on school grounds. They were always while they were walking towards the bus stop or walking to or fro. And so that's something we want to make sure that our students know, that when they get there, they're going to be safe in those schools. And so that is my biggest thing. And I go there often. I don't see anyone flaunting around with a gun or anything like that, this boogeyman. I see safeness. I see someone coming towards them, wanting to assist them, go to games. Like I said, call me all time of nights when someone needed housing services. I mean, it's beyond that. So I hope that everyone take this time to, just to get all of the facts, and even attend the meeting on the 8th of May at 5 p.m. just to hear. I do believe that we need every single service, every single agency involved, all hands on deck. And again, I don't believe that we should eliminate school police out of that deal, because just having a counselor, that's great. But if a safety thing, came up, that counselor can't help.
Can't do anything.
And let's just be real. Parents, we can't, unless you come in there strapped. Let's be real. We have to have all avenues on it. So I'm so grateful again just for everyone that tuned in. I'm grateful for everyone that the positive dialogue that went on from last night and this morning, and hopefully you continue to share this video. Hopefully we'll see y'all on May the 8th. I'm gonna let Miss Miriam end it out, because she's gonna talk about what's gonna be going on next week. And again, each and every Tuesday, you can see us on radioonfire.com. We want to thank Sergeant Clyde Boatwright. Is there any lasting words that you would like to say?
I would be remiss with that Merville situation. Officer Lanzi,
Yes.
Officer Fayal,
He putting everybody up in the name.
Corporal Warren. Those guys do
Yes.
an amazing job, and it was because of their dedication, their professionalism,
Absolutely.
that allowed that
Thank
case
you.
to come.
It takes
to
a
point.
village.
Yes, it does take a village.
All right.
I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today with Restoring the Village on Radio on Fire. I want to thank our special guest today, Sergeant Clyde Boatwright, and I want to thank my beautiful, wonderful host, Angie here. And we will see you next Tuesday at 6:15. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
See ya.